We're back with my new favorite thing to do, and that's to break down a couple of episodes of television. Templar 10, thanks for joining us again on this here episode of the Roundtable. It's episodes, I'm saying 14 or 15 maybe, and we're in our Severance season, goodness gracious, we're in our Severance Season 2 speedrun. It's a lot of S's. I need to make sure I cut out that EQ with all of the siblings thing. Up until this point, we've talked a lot about reintegration. We've talked a lot about kind of like a very solid building story. We've enjoyed it, but it's kind of been building. And now I think we're going to kick into, this is the duality of Severance in these next two episodes. This is like the highs and the lows all wrapped into about 2 hours of television. So before we kick in there, what do you feel about episodes 7 and 8? Just right off the dome.
Well, also this is episode 15 of the Roundtable season 3, just to ground us here.
That guy gets it.
So he knows. I mean, I had to go back and double check just to make sure I knew, but just for the sake of
I'm bad with addition, man. That's why I'm a pastor.
Whatever, it's fine. We put out episodes. It's okay.
Exactly. They're on the internet. Go find them. They're on YouTube. What
did I think about discord.gg/Luxdiddlechurch?
Nice.
I almost did it. I always struggle with the .gg / I always trip over it. So episode 7 and 8, yeah, as you said, this is sort of the duality, and I would say I'll say generally speaking, because when we did our episode on season 1, I was a little harsh on season 1 rather. I was a little harsh on season 1. Generally speaking, I've enjoyed season 2 quite a bit more than season 1. And season 1 is solid. And I know people are really high on it. I'm less so, but I still think it's quite good. As you said, though, this is it. So episode 7 is probably my favorite episode of the season so far. I think both just in terms of what it's dealing with in terms of themes. I've been wanting to see more of Gemma, and this is a whole episode basically of Gemma. I think essentially this isn't entirely her perspective. We get a little bit with Ragabi and Devin because Mark has had a seizure and collapsed at the end of the last episode. So we're getting a little bit there of them kind of dealing with that, and Devin, threatening to call Cobel, and Ragabi threatening to leave because of that, and all these sorts of things. But most of this is Gemma. And I think the kind of flashbacks to their relationship is nice. It's nice to sort of see the build in terms of their interaction. And then also we're getting a little bit more now moving forward in terms of what some of at least to help speculate on what some of the files MDR is working on, because Gemma is on another floor. She takes the export elevator down. She's on a separate floor there, and she goes into all these different rooms. Each room is connected to one of the files that they've mentioned or been working on in MDR. And so the one that's left, we get again this reference to Cold Harbor. There's a Cold Harbor room that's she hasn't gone in yet. That's the only room she hasn't gone in yet. So there's some sort of suggestion that obviously whatever they're working on in MDR is connected to the contents of these rooms.
Right.
Now, we don't see the contents of all of the rooms, but one, it seems like every time she goes in there, she gets a dental work done, or she gets her teeth cleaned. We also see that she isn't severed on the floor. It's her. She knows who Mark is. She knows they were married. She has those kind of memories. But then in every room, it seems like there's a different severed version of herself.
Yes.
Which is very interesting. So this raises a lot of questions of, is this a sort of the next step in Severance technology that they're working on, which is that maybe having, instead of just 2 versions, you can have many different versions of one person. And so in every room, there's a different severed version of her. And so we get these interviews with Dr. Maurer, asking about her after she leaves a room because she doesn't remember anything, asking her about her memories, how did she feel, because the emotion sort of carries over between rooms. How did she feel when she left it? So it's a very interesting episode, and it's nice to see some of the background, their relationship together. They had a miscarriage. You get some of that. They went to a fertility clinic. Some of how they met, that sort of thing, which I think is really nice. And I like that we're seeing more now of all these different rooms, even if we don't know what the purpose of them is. All these different rooms, this kind of testing that's being done on her. So it still raises a lot of questions, but I mean, it seems like we're moving towards some kind of answer. And then, of course, at the end of the episode, she does attack Mauer and tries to escape.
Yes.
But when she gets up to the severed floor, so like in this case, it would be kind of the middle floor now, she reverts back to Miss Casey.
Yes.
And then so she doesn't remember what she did. And then Milchek obviously runs down because he gets word and basically sends her back down again. So she is sort of struggling with the same thing the Anies are struggling with just like trying to get out and carry something over, but she can't. So this is my favorite episode so far this season. I think it's been really effective. I think it was emotionally quite effective.
Yes.
And also I think it moves things forward in an interesting way, plot wise, mystery wise.
All right. So a couple of things then. We kind of, you ran through the plot there without really intending to. A couple of things that come up in this episode, and that it was good. I love the way you did that. A couple of things come up. Number one, we find out that they met at Gans College. Gans College is going to come up in episode 8 in just a little bit. Obviously, there's a fertility clinic, and Dr. Mauer is at the fertility clinic. There he is right there with the Metal Gear exclamation point over his head. There's a couple of interesting things that also happen as well. So each of the names, like you said, correspond to the MDR files, but they're all some sort of like... It feels like they're in the 70s, or she has to dress up like 60s or 70s, like she's playing a bit part in the 1960s or 70s. You see that like she has a new wardrobe every time she has to go to this new thing. She remembers that she has to dress up and do a thing. She doesn't remember what happens in the rooms. She comes back out of the room, and sometimes her jaw hurts. Sometimes she can remember like certain flashes, things like that. I think that's fascinating. There's two big things that stick out to me in this episode. Number one, the idyllic, also the fact that Dr. Mauer, the mustaches he's always wearing is just hysterical to me. Can I back this up? So the mustache he's wearing here in the episode where they're kind of like watching over people at home is hysterical. Then he's got the mustache in the Christmas card thing. It's just so bad. Like, it's just like, what are you doing here? There's another mustache here. It's very funny the way they dress him up. And then she slams him in the head, and that's also very funny. So the fascinating thing is she doesn't remember any of this stuff. It almost feels like what Lumen is trying to do is they're trying to put her back together. Like, she's a testing subject, so maybe, possibly, probably she did get an accident, or she was caused. Somebody caused an accident for her, and that's why it's called Cold Harbor. This is all about her kind of not reintegrating, but being restored as a human. So there's that. She crashed into the harbor. But the second, and that's why Mark is working on it, because Mark knows her so well and knows, like, you remember we were talking about the feelings, like the numbers are supposed to give you a feeling. And so he's relating to this because like he can see her in the numbers. There's something interesting there. But the second thing is it seems like she doesn't remember what happens in the other rooms. Like, she's severed in each room separately. So like she's not severed, but then each room. So like the Christmas cards thing, which is a total drag, the dentist thing, which is a total drag, like working the plane crash thing. Like, it's almost like what Lumen is trying to do is create some sort of miracle drug or miracle thing to make it so that you don't have to experience the most painful portions of your life. And so you see this also in the baby birthing center in season 1, where the senator has a baby and Devin's up on the hill, or Devin talks her through the whole thing. And then the next day, Devin's up on the hill as she's having the baby, or after she has the baby, and she waves, and the senator's like, I don't freaking know who this is. It's almost like what they're trying to do with Severance is to make it so that you have a way, if you're going through the most painful portions of your life or portions you don't want to experience, you just sever and then you can come back. So that's kind of what it feels like there. I don't know. The last little thing too is watching her like try to escape was heartbreaking, man. Just like, we know what's going to happen here. We know, like, don't do it. You're a sympathetic figure now, Gemma. Don't do it. And then she does it, and then she winds it back up and just a crying, heaping mess. And then the nurse comes over and gathers her up, and she's back to her testing, you know? So what am I missing here from Shikai Bardo, the name of this episode, by the way?
So that's everything I can recall from it, or at least those are the main things that stood out to me. There might be some sort of additional elements, you know, hidden in there, but I think that was mostly it. At the end, Mark does wake up because he was kind of out the whole time.
Right.
And then he's kind of still remembering things about Gemma. So like, I don't know if there's a connection there or if it's just, you know, they were sort of both doing it. Obviously, that's important. It does suggest, because there isn't really a payoff from this episode yet, because episode 8, again, kind of goes an entirely different direction, which the show seems to like to do.
Right.
When they set up a bunch of things, the next episode then just entirely diverts it to something else. Like, episode 3 into episode 4, it just takes a hard left in a different direction.
Very true.
So I'll be interested to see this week with episode 9 what the kind of payoff from all this is, like what he does remember, how reintegrated is he, and then we'll get into it with episode 8 here. So I'll, you know, we're talking about it. So I, you know, but the Devin calls her, which I wonder how that works, because Ragabi said she would leave if Devin called Cobel, so she doesn't, or at least she said she doesn't. But then in the next episode, in episode 8, we see that she's trying to get a hold of her like the entire day. Like she's calling her like multiple times. So does that mean Ragabi like left then, or does she not know? Like, will they end up working together then? Like, will there be some sort of like a kind of alliance? But you know, I'm getting a little ahead of things, but. So yeah, that's on the main stuff from episode 7, I think.
Let's dip into episode 8 then. I agree with you. 7 has been my favorite of the season. Gemma is, to me, a very compelling character. Compelling in a way that I didn't. Maybe it's because her name sounds remarkably like my wife's, Jenna, and is almost spelled the same way. My wife is Ginna. This is Gemma. But also, I think you haven't seen a whole lot of her, right? Like, she's been kind of the white whale. She's been the thing that they need to catch. She's been the elusive figure, and now we get this like, oh, she's being treated like crap down below in down the exports thing. Maybe she's not. Maybe it's not directly down the exports hallway, but you know, down there she's being treated like crap. So then, yeah, we dive into episode 8, and we're nowhere near Gemma at all. In fact, we have Miss Cobel, Harmony Cobel, arriving back at Salt's Neck, which is this weird seaside town. The one thing on this video I wanted to pull up, actually, I was looking at this. The real location is in Newfoundland, and it is. So this entire episode is about how this little town in Newfoundland, whatever it's called, Salt's Neck, but in Newfoundland, I can't remember what the name of the town is, but it was controlled by a manufacturing, like an industry, just like Salt's Neck was. Salt's Neck was home to Kier's manufacturing, specifically of ether. Well, of like not ether like the Bitcoin, but that's Ethereum. But you know, of like essentially chloroform and things that were used for anesthesia. And so they're addicted to this drug. A lot of the population, it seems, is addicted to this drug. And you can tell Harmony, I mean, she grew up here, but she doesn't really care about it. You can tell that kind of from the opening scene where she brushes her teeth and spits it on the ground and then just tosses the water bottle out of the car. She just doesn't care about this place anymore, and it's all run down and it's really gray. She walks up to the whatever the name of the cafe is, and she meets up with this guy Hampton, who owns this cafe, the Dripping Pot or whatever it's called, Leaky Pot, and he's like, I guess, is dealing an ether dealer as well. He's like giving people free hits of ether, and to the point that like it appears that this industry town had very bad effects on the population here. I think the indication, or what they're trying to say, is the old lady wearing the oxygen, she's wearing that because of the plant. That would be my assumption. You know, so she goes and Miss Cobel like needs to get snuck into where her old house is, and so she becomes friends with Hampton, and Hampton drives her into her old house and meets her aunt. We're assuming it's her aunt, Sissy Cobel. Could be like a weird sister, but I think it's presumed to be an aunt. And she's just like Lumen crazy. The aunt is like super Lumen crazy. And there's the GANs, by the way. So these are the three schools that I was just talking about. So Providence, Kier, and GANs. So Kier is where Harmony Cobel went to. GANs is the college that Mark and Gemma taught at. And then Providence is where this field hockey thing happened. And so Providence is also mentioned in some of this stuff. And also, so what's her face here? Miss Wong. She is trying to gain the Wintertide Award from the Kier School, or School of Kier, or whatever it's called. So there's all these weird sort of like, things. And I think the assumption is that Cobel won the Wintertide as well, because later on you hear of Harmony's mom, Charlotte, I believe. Yeah, Charlotte. She died. And it appears that she died because of, again, more of the ether stuff. There's a weird scene where Cobel falls asleep on her mom's bed and plugs in the breathing tube that she had been carrying around and like starts to breathe through it, which I thought was very, very weird. And like hums herself to sleep. And that was like almost uncomfortable to me. I don't know how you felt about it, but my heart felt a little uncomfortable watching that. Then she wakes up, or Hampton wakes her up, and they get high on her mom's bed, which... Okay, cool. Why not? They breathe in the ether, which is almost like chloroform. And she mentions that she's looking for something. And so Harmony finally goes outside to this like storeroom thing and finds this statue of Jaime Egan. And inside the statue of, or the award that she had won, is all of her papers. And all of the papers that basically show that she had invented the severance procedure. Now, Sissy tries to burn it and ends up, Cobel saves it and then runs away. You see a car coming, could be Drummond, it could be another lackey, who knows who's coming down the pipe. There's a couple of things here, and then I want to get your thoughts here. But the thing I put together, so episode 6, you at the dinner party, you had mentioned that it had seemed like the intimation there was that Bert had been working for Lumen before Severance happened, and the assumption was the reason he got severed is because he had done a bunch of bad things. I think this is the bad thing that he did by taking Harmony Cobel's actual severance procedure from her, because she says that I was told that this is, Kier, whatever. The ideal is that we share all and we're going to save the world with this and yada, yada, yada. And instead, Bert realizes that he steals it from, Cobel, helps to get it manufactured or it gives it to Jaime Egan, helps to get it manufactured, realizes like this is not at all what it is. And then says, all right, well, I'm going to be severed then just to kind of get it over with. That's the thing I kind of pulled out of that. Like, almost like Bert was trying to be saved because of that, because of his Christian deals. There's that one. And then the very last thing that happens is Cobel's driving away, and she finally picks up the call from Devin, who's been calling nonstop, and then says, hey, is Mark alive? And Devin says, yeah, Ragabi was here. Or says the woman was here, and she says Ragabi, and Devin says yes, and so they obviously know each other. And then she says, get Mark on the phone, and Mark gets on the phone, and it ends with her saying, tell me everything. With, again, I think the assumption is one of two things. Either Cobel wants to take Lumen down, or Cobel is going to try to sell Mark out to try to get back into Lumen. I don't really know. So what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, well, referencing, I remember what we talked about about episode 7, this is kind of the opposite side of that, in that this is probably my least favorite episode of the season so far. The other Duality. It's interesting enough, and I get that it's setting a lot of things up that are building, and there is, the revelations kind of at the end with the notebook, and that she was the kind of I get this, she came up with a lot of this stuff, and she was maybe responsible for the severance procedure. And so, like, there's definitely some interesting things there. But the episode as a whole, I found kind of not a whole lot. I mean, I guess it's trying to drive home something that is certainly not uncommon historically, like the idea that towns would spring up around industry, whether it was a factory or fishing or maybe a coal mine or something, and then eventually those things shut down and then the town kind of dies. And so it's showing that, the consequences of that, and sort of how it's left, and how, I guess, little Lumen sort of is concerned about the damage that they do there. I don't find Cobel a particularly interesting character, like, or at least not a compelling character. So an entire episode devoted to her is not of particular interest to me. I am interested, I guess, to see what they do with it and where it goes. And this again ties into, I'll probably like this episode more if it goes somewhere interesting. So yeah, I wasn't as much into this episode. Some of the revelations are interesting. I don't know why Devin all of a sudden felt like calling Cobel. That doesn't really make sense to me.
Yeah.
Because, like, Mark wakes up, or like when they do the overtime thing, and then she realizes Cobel is there, and then she thinks Cobel stole her kid. And it's like, as far as I'm aware, that's kind of where it's left. So, like, the idea that she would, of all people, she would call Cobel or think that she could trust Cobel is strange to me, unless there's like a middle piece there where she learns something different that leads her to believe that she can trust her. I don't really understand why she would feel like it's okay. Like, why she would feel like trusting Cobel makes any kind of sense given the situation. So, like, just character decision wise, I don't know if that makes the most sense to me, but maybe I'm forgetting a sort of, piece there that does explain it. But yeah, I am interested to see where it goes. I referenced it with the last episode of, so does Cobel help now? Obviously, she has a lot of bitterness. Seemingly, I mean, she could hold Lumen responsible for the death of her mother.
Yep.
She certainly seems to be kind of turning, like she was kind of a zealot, and now she's, really seems like that's bringing out a lot of anger in her, the kind of turning in the way she kind of attacked, her aunt, like, verbally at least anyway, and sort of tearing her down, and maybe kind of seeing that sort of fanaticism that she used to be a part of. So I am interested to see where that goes, and if, did Ragabi leave? Again, is she going to come back? Are they going to kind of join forces, and they're all going to kind of work together to take down, or at least to go after Lumen? Because I assume they're not going to take down Lumen in this season, but where that's going to sort of leave things off. So, it raises some interesting questions. I am curious to see what they do with it, but yeah, this episode wasn't really that interesting to me. I just wasn't particularly into it, so we'll see where it goes, though.
It felt, again, more like episode 4 with less real story. Now, I'm sure all of the Severance nuts out there are telling me, like, yo, that's dumb. Look at all of the stuff that was in the corners. And while that's true, I agree with that. I read some article, I can't remember where I read it, but it said, like, this was probably the most polarizing episode of this season so far. Like, you either loved it or you hated it. And again, I can 100% see that. Like, that picture with Jamie Egan and a young Cobel as she wins the award, great. But, like, it doesn't really affect me either way. It's brilliant the way they did it. I'm not going to lie. Like, there's the little musical callbacks and all sorts of little things in here that are like, oh, that's really cool. But also, like, man, I had to go to a YouTube video to figure all that stuff out. And like, you and I watch a lot of television, and, like, we're decently smart individuals. If I have to be, like, going to a YouTube video to parse some of these things out, instead of, like, supplementing what I already saw, like, that's different. If it's a supplement, cool. But, like, if I have to figure out, like, wait a minute, what the heck is going on here? You lost me a little bit. Brilliantly shot. 45 minutes of scenery and just really gray, awesome looking shots, really dark, really contrasty, all of that for like 3 minutes of plot. That was it. Maybe 5 minutes of plot.
Yeah, and I mean, it shines a little light, I guess, on her upbringing and, like, her relationship with this guy, and, like, it's fine, but I just feel like there hasn't been enough that makes me interested in Cobel's history to and I guess it will probably end up being relevant, but there just hasn't been enough that's made me interested in Cobel's history to have an entire episode of that length only about her, with the revelation, basically just being at the end there. It just isn't sufficient. Again, it's okay. There are some strengths of it, as you have kind of said, in terms of the how it looks, how it's set up. Again, I'm sure it will lead to something more interesting, but it's just, this one wasn't for me.
Yeah.
But the season 1 ended strong, and so I do anticipate that season 2 will also end strong. So I'm assuming something interesting will come out of it. It's just, we haven't seen it yet, so we don't know.
Yeah. I mean, and there's still questions of like, is she actually severed as well? Like, she wears that necklace with the Severance thing in it. Was she one of the original Severance test members? Stuff like that. Like, there's all of those things. At the core of it, it feels like they're just going to do the whole let's take down the man type of storyline now, which is cool. Like, yes, take down Lumen. It's an evil empire. It is like it. We're seeing that it destroyed an entire town. It's probably destroying other lives. Like, it is what it is. Is this entire thing going to wind up just being an anti-corporate manifesto? Because like, I'm not going to lie, I'm going to be a little disappointed if that's all this is. It's like an anti-corporate manifesto, because like I could have watched a Ben Affleck movie about that. Has Ben Affleck received or made a movie about that? I'm sure he has. Somebody's made a movie about that. Liam Neeson's made an anti-corporate movie somewhere. Like, I could have just watched that instead of like getting really hyped and like watching all of this stuff about Severance. And I guess it's the journey is better than the destination and things like this. I get that. I get that. Like, you're not serving me. I understand that as well. But like I told you at the beginning or before we were recording this, like I had thoughts about this episode, and like outside of that one little revelation that I had about Bert there, I was a little frustrated with this one. Like, man, you had such a good momentum. 4, 5, 6 were solid. Just like foundations. 7 was awesome. 8, I don't know, man. It felt like it felt like a letdown, in my opinion.
It did. I mean, I think it's, again, it's getting your attention. This is setting things up, and it is interesting in the sense that it's less weird than a lot of the other episodes. Like this one, it's a pretty straightforward episode. Like,
oh, there's some weirdness there, man. Like her laying on that bed, breathing through that tube. That was pretty weird.
We have weirdness in terms of character, I guess, but like less weird in terms of kind of it is more straightforward in that it's That's like true. she goes to this town. The town died because the Lumen factory left. She has a weird aunt who was like super zealous, whatever. Like, I don't know. Compared to other Severance episodes, I think it's a little more straightforward, at least in some ways. Maybe there'll be a bunch of revelations that come out of it, and that won't be the case. So who knows? But so it's okay.
We've stripped the bones off of this one. Do better. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm just also people in the comments. How dare I criticize Severance? I know, but like the rhetoric on a lot of people right now is like, well, if you dislike one episode, you dislike all of them. It's like, hold on a second. No. I'm allowed to like the whole thing, like be really enthusiastic about the whole thing, and also not like certain parts about it. One of my top 5 favorite shows of all time is Lost, and that show had like a season and a half of just stink, just clangers, just bad stuff. And it's okay. Like, I'm allowed to criticize and still think the overall package is good. It's fine. Like we can have nuance in our arguments. Speaking of, do you want to talk about the new Canadian Prime Minister? No. No, we don't want to.
I don't really.
Speaking of nuance, No. Anything else about these last 2 episodes before we launch into... We'll be caught up. So the next time you see these pretty faces, we will be talking about episode 9. And episode 9 will be happening shortly, like before we actually talk about it. So I'm excited about that. That's going to be cool.
Yeah, we're all caught up. So
yeah,
that's good. So the next ones will just be individual episodes of the Roundtable, so that'll be nice. Just to be able to kind of focus on one and talk about it. And I imagine there'll be lots going on these final 2 episodes, so I think that kind of works out anyway. So
yeah, absolutely.
Looking forward to it.
Heck yeah. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. Again, stay tuned. You can watch the rest of the videos in the thing down there, or the other thing, or some links. It's YouTube. You can figure it out. You don't need... Let me stand on a soapbox real quick for like 30 seconds here, and let's get over the fact that we need to go through every freaking time how to find links. Please click a thumbs up. Please hit a subscribe. Like, come on, YouTube's been around for over 20 years now, and we haven't figured this out. You guys know what the deal is. If you don't like us, then just go right on by. It's fine. But if you do like us, just hit the things. Just click one button. One out of the 7 buttons that are on the screen with you right now. Okay? Templar, go click a button, and we're gonna end here. I'm gonna click this finish button. We love you. Thanks for joining us on this episode. We'll talk to you next time. Bye.